Is love a force that saves us or one that destroys us? The Sorrows of Young Werther by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe is an epistolary novel that portrays the emotional collapse of a young man who allows feeling to overpower reason. Told through Werther's letters, the novel explores intense love, isolation, and the consequences of emotional absolutism. Werther falls deeply in love with Charlotte, Lotte, a woman already engaged to another man. This unattainable love becomes the center of his existence and his undoing. Werther, a man of pure emotion. Werther is sensitive, artistic, and deeply attuned to his emotions. He refuses compromise and lives fully within his feelings. What makes him authentic also makes him vulnerable. He lacks the distance needed to survive emotional pain. Lotte, love without possession. Lotte is kind, grounded, and committed to Albert. She represents warmth and stability, but not availability. Werther's love for her is sincere yet impossible to fulfill. This impossibility intensifies his emotional suffering. Individual versus society. Werther struggles within social norms that value reason, self-control, and responsibility. To him, these constraints feel suffocating. Unable to reconcile his inner world with external expectations, he withdraws further into himself. Emotional extremity and tragedy. Unable to resolve his inner conflict, Werther chooses death as an escape from unbearable pain. Goethe does not present this act as weakness, but as a tragic consequence of elevating emotion above all else. A symbol of Sturm und Drang. The novel became a defining work of the Sturm und Drang movement, which emphasized emotion, individuality, and rebellion against rationalism. Its impact was immense, both inspiring empathy and provoking concern over its influence on vulnerable readers. The Sorrows of Young Werther ultimately serves as both a celebration of feeling and a warning about its dangers. Next, we'll explore why Werther's struggle still resonates in modern discussions of emotion, identity, and mental health.
So, here's a wild question for you. Can a book be dangerous? I mean, actually dangerous? Like, could a novel kill someone? Today, we're going to dive into a nearly 250-year-old story that was blamed for a very real and very tragic wave of deaths across Europe.
And look, this isn't just some urban legend. The story of this man, Bertel, found on the banks of the Hudson River with a copy of this exact novel laid out next to him, well, that's just one of the chilling accounts that cemented this book's deadly reputation.
So that's the big question, isn't it? What on earth was written in the pages of this book that made it so potent, so influential, that it could be linked to real-world tragedy? To figure that out, we have to start by understanding the novel itself.
Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to crack open the book itself. What was it about the Sorrows of Young Werther that completely captured an entire generation?
When this book was published back in 1774, it wasn't just a hit. It was a full-blown cultural explosion. Its author, Goethe, was only 25 years old, and he basically became an overnight literary rock star. Seriously, this was the book everyone was talking about, all the way up to Napoleon Bonaparte.
Goethe used this really clever format called an epistolary novel. The whole story is told through letters from the main character. And this isn't just a style choice. It's a trick that pulls you right inside Werther's head. There's no narrator, no filter. You are reading his raw, private thoughts as they happen.
And wow, just listen to that voice. This quote right here gives you a taste of the pure emotional intensity. Werther isn't just sad, he's being devoured by his feelings. His passion is everything, and his despair is bottomless. This is the voice that had an entire continent hooked.
So the plot seems pretty straightforward on the surface. You've got Werther, a young, super passionate artist, who falls completely, hopelessly in love with a woman named Lotte. The big problem? She's already engaged to someone else. Werther feels totally alone, misunderstood by the world, and just can't shake this obsession. It's a classic story of passion hitting a brick wall.
But, a simple story about unrequited love doesn't really explain the absolute chaos that followed this book's publication. To really get it, we need to take a closer look at the mind of our hero, Werther. What's so fascinating is that way later, thinkers like Sigmund Freud looked back at Werther and saw more than just a character. They saw a perfect psychological case study. He was like an archetype for a special kind of suffering, which totally resonated with the whole storm and stress movement of the time, an era that was all about intense personal emotion over cold, hard logic.
Freud actually laid out these 5 key characteristics of what he called melancholy. And when you look at them, it's literally a checklist for Werther. That agonizing discontent? Check. Losing interest in everything but Lotte? Check. He can't love anyone else, his art falls apart, and his self-worth just completely tanks. Check, check, check. And this chart illustrates the core of the problem perfectly. Freud made a big distinction between healthy mourning, where you process a loss and eventually move forward, and this pathological melancholy. With melancholy, the person is psychologically stuck. They just can't let go. Werther can't detach from Lotte. His entire identity becomes wrapped up in losing her. And here's the other crucial piece of the puzzle, his narcissism. Werther truly believes his suffering is special, that his love is deeper than anyone else could ever understand. This makes him feel completely alone, sure, but it also makes it impossible for him to handle rejection. I mean, if you're so extraordinary, how could the world possibly deny you what you want? So you've got this incredibly intense, psychologically relatable portrait of despair. And this is where the story takes a seriously dark turn, as that fictional psychology starts to bleed out of the pages and into the real world. The book's impact was immediate, and it was massive. It kicked off something called Werther fever. It wasn't just a bestseller, it was a whole cultural moment. Young men everywhere started dressing just like him, in his signature blue coat and yellow vest. It was basically the 18th century version of going viral. But the imitation didn't stop with fashion. The most disturbing part of Werther fever was the wave of reports about young men, often dealing with their own romantic rejection, who took their own lives in a way that directly mirrored Werther's tragic end in the novel. And this is how the book got its killer reputation.
This whole phenomenon was so distinct, it actually gave birth to a term we still use in sociology today, the Werther effect. It describes a contagion, a spike in copycat suicides that can happen after a highly publicized death. It's a concept so well documented that it has led to the modern media guidelines on how to report on suicide responsibly.
And this wasn't just some one-off historical curiosity. As you can see, a similar thing was reported in Russia a few years later, after another tragic novel came out. The idea that was born from an 18th century book is still a very serious consideration for public health experts in the media today. You know, the panic over Werther wasn't a one-time thing. It was actually an early example of something we see over and over again, a moral panic about a new piece of art or media. It brings up a question we are still fighting over today. How do we react when we think art is dangerous?
The panic over Werther might have been one of the first big moral panics over media, but it definitely wasn't the last. I mean, the pattern just repeats itself throughout history. Cheap, thrilling penny dreadfuls in the 1800s, comic books in the 50s, heavy metal music, movies like A Clockwork Orange, and of course, video games. All of them have been accused of inspiring real-world harm.
And here's the crucial counterpoint. While those anecdotal stories, the ones about Werther or Stephen King's novel Rage, are incredibly disturbing, modern science has really struggled to find a direct causal link. Study after study has failed to prove that reading a certain book or playing a certain video game causes a person to become violent. The relationship is just way more complicated than that.
So all of this brings us right back to our original question. After digging into Werther's story, his psychology, and his very real, very tragic impact on the world, what's the answer? Is art dangerous?
And maybe this quote is the best way to think about it. We want art to have power over us, don't we? We want a book or a song to change our lives, to be, as Kafka once put it, the axe for the frozen sea inside us. So if we accept that art can change us for the better, maybe we also have to accept that it's a powerful and, yeah, sometimes dangerous force. Maybe to deny its danger is to deny its power entirely.